This was the Crosby, Stills, Nash album cover, which, once again, we were just shooting publicity photos, but we found this old house in West Hollywood, right off of Santa Monica Boulevard, and it looked so good, we shot some color, but they were sitting, and then later they wanted to use it for an album cover, but they're sitting backwards. At the time we took the picture, they didn't have a name yet. They weren't called Crosby, Stills, Nash. In fact, they almost were Stills, Nash, and Crosby, but you know, they tried it all the different ways, and so they said, well, this would be a good cover, but we're backwards, and if we flip it over, then Stephen will be holding the guitar backwards, so that won't work. So I said, let's just go back there. It'll take 5 minutes. You just jump on the couch, click, 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 we're done. So we all got in the car and went down there, and the house was gone. So that's how the cover was with you know, sitting backwards. And then Stephen had bought them these coats, these fur coats. He bought wolf coats for David and Graham, and he bought himself a Wolverine coat, because that's a little bit badder than a wolf. Stephen's not here, is he? Don't tell him I said that. No, he's a really good friend of mine. But we went up to Big Bear and took these pictures up there in the snow. And one like this was on the inside of the album. Oh, this was in the limo. Once again, we rode in a limo up there, a couple-hour trip. And I was sitting in the jump seat, sort of just, you know, if I turned around, I'd be facing them just like that. So after, you know, an hour and a half, they kind of forgot I was there, so it was easy to take candid pictures like this. That's the whole secret, is to try to be invisible, try to be a fly on the wall, you know, so that you don't interrupt what's going on, but you can actually get the picture of it. I went with him up to a cabin in the Colorado mountains, and the night before this, he got a call that Jimi Hendrix had died. And he sat up all night playing the piano, and in the morning, suddenly there was snow outside, and he said, quick, grab your camera, and he got a guitar, and we went out there, we took a few shots, and he said, wait a minute, and he ran in and came out with that pink giraffe, set it down, you know, and I took a few shots, and I said, okay, we're done with the giraffe, you know. He said, no, I want this in all the pictures. There was no reason for we were just taking them for the fun of it, but later that year, they needed an album cover, and we picked this for the album cover. I didn't understand that giraffe, but you know, later, I can't do it here, but if you take that giraffe out, it's not much of a picture. So it really worked. It really worked on the cover. This is David Crosby. This was the first year I photographed. That was out at the Renaissance Fair when it was out in Agoura in the Malibu Hills. And he was in the Birds then. So I took that then, and here he is some years later. It was for the cover of a guitar magazine. And we were taking pictures, but he had so many double chins, we figured we'd get a ladder and get up and shoot down, and then you wouldn't see the double chins, but that didn't quite work either. There's Neil Young at his ranch up in Northern California. And then we'll better get through these. Here's the cover of the book. This was a house that he had just bought in Malibu, and it had no furniture whatsoever in it, except this moose head in the garage. So Neil put the sunglasses, hi Nuri. Neil put the sunglasses on the moose, and we were laughing about that, and then just as I raised my camera to take the picture, he just went like that with the beer bottle, so there was like one shot of him doing that. And then the house, before he could really move in, the house burned down. I suppose the moose had too. I don't know whatever happened to it. Then he moved to, well, he already had his ranch up in Northern California in Redwood City. This was one day just walking around in the morning, sort of surveying the place. That's his cattle grazing on the hillside. And we were in that barn looking at some guitar, and I turned around, and he'd walked outside to look at something, and I just turned around and took that one picture. But Paul and Linda, I knew Linda as a fellow photographer, and she needed some pictures of the two of them for a songbook. So she called me to come out to Malibu when they were staying there, And then she said, we want to see these pictures first thing in the morning because Life magazine needs a cover. And they picked this out, and it was the cover of Life magazine, my accidental Life magazine cover. There's me doing a group shot, self-portrait group shot. And there's Heather and Mary sliding down the slide. This is Bangladesh. Stephen Stills had done a solo concert at Madison Square Garden the night before, and Chipmunk, the stage and lighting director, said, Henry, you ought to come back tomorrow night. George Harrison is going to be playing. And I said, well, I'd love to, but I don't know those people. I can't get a photo pass. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a crew pass. And you come back in the morning and leave your cameras underneath my lighting board, and then during the show you can just sneak them out. So that's what I did. I was right on stage in the wings. This is on the road with the New Barbarians. That's Ron Wood in the yellow hat and Keith in the white coat, Keith Richards. And it was Ron's solo record that he was promoting around the country for Sony Columbia Records then. And so that's their wives and girlfriends in the front. We're walking out on the airfield to get on the plane. Everywhere Keith went, he had a boom box. See, Ronnie has that boom box, and it's playing this funky reggae, real heavy, strong, loud, funky reggae. And it was like the soundtrack to their lives. Everywhere he went, that music was playing. In fact, when we checked into hotels, they had to be sure to rent the rooms on either side, above, below, and so they would completely surround his room with their own rooms for the rest of the crew, because he stayed up all night playing that music. And here's them in a Learjet doing their Mick Jagger imitation. This was like a Rolling Stones tour. It went on for 3 weeks, and but Mick wasn't there, so it was kind of more fun. It was like the boss wasn't there. Here's Kurt Cobain at the Forum. I didn't know him. I never really met him. I just thought my daughter, Zoe, was 13 and she wanted to go, so I knew the management company, and they gave me a couple tickets way in the back because it was just a few days before the concert. But they gave me a photo pass, so I'm sitting up there with her, and I'm looking through my binoculars. So I figure if I can't shoot, I at least want to look. And I see all my friends in the front, photographing like crazy during the first song, and I think, well, I'm an idiot. I'm sitting up here, I got my cameras, I should be down there. So I said, Zoe, honey, just sit here, don't move, I'll be back. And I went down, and the third, we can only shoot 3 songs. So for the third song, he just stood there at the microphone. It was really, most of the role was pretty boring. It was kind of a yellow light, and he was just standing there doing nothing. And then at the end of the song, he just turned and kind of moved like that. Monday morning, Hendrix came out. He was supposed to end the show Sunday night, but it was so backed up that he came out Monday morning, and everybody, everyone had been up for 3 days, and everybody was kind of groggy. And boy, this woke everybody up. First of all, they came out with those colorful headbands, and the music was, when he played the Star Spangled Banner, it was just amazing. It was absolutely silent. And the whole crowd wasn't on that hill anymore. There was just a smaller crowd in front of the stage. I mean, there were 400,000 people on that hillside. I mean, there was maybe there was 20,000, 30,000 people right in the front. And so the sound ricocheted off the hills and echoed back, and it was a very, very eerie moment in the early stillness of the morning. Here's Woodstock 94. Michael Lang had 3 Woodstock 69, 94, and 99, all of which were fantastic concerts. Crowd surfing was the big thing in 94. The mud people. At Woodstock, it always rains, and then there's the people that wallow in the mud and slide in the mud. This is also Woodstock 94. This picture, I just think is so timeless, right? You could say Czechoslovakia, 1832. I don't know. How could you date that? I just love that picture. That was the front row. Here's the traditional end picture, the end. David Cassidy in New Zealand. Okay, well, that is the end of the slide. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'll answer a couple, and then I'll get to signing books. Yes?
Hi, Ruth Eagles here. I just wanted to ask, on the Morrison Hotel shots, did the
Yeah.
Morrison Hotel get any benefit from that, any money?
Oh, well, you know, we sneaked the shot and didn't,
Right.
you know, and it was owned by a slum lord. That's why the guy behind the desk was so scared to let us shoot without permission. I think the attorneys for the record company had to contact him and, you know, pay him some $500 or something.
Right.
In fact, there's a friend of mine here today that we're talking about. That hotel is for sale. I mean, it's all boarded up, and it's, you know, millions of dollars, and it would cost millions to refurbish it, but someday someone will buy it. Yes? Yes, sir, in the front row?
You also did a shoot with the Doors on Venice Beach.
Right.
Can you tell us a story about that?
Oh, after we did the Morrison Hotel shot, they said, well, okay, this is great for the album cover now, but we need publicity shots. In those days, you had to do black and white, because newspapers didn't print color. And so everybody really needed black and white for publicity purposes. So we had to schedule another shoot a week later, and we went out to Venice Beach. And we spent the day walking around. It was kind of a foggy day, not too many people there. And we walked around, went under the pier. There was a Venice pier, which isn't there anymore. And just spent the whole afternoon walking around, kind of having a good time at the beach. And there's pictures of that in the book, Unpainted Faces. Yes?
Hi, there's kind of a minor resurgence of vinyl being reissued and,
Right.
and you know, new artists putting out vinyl and stuff.
Right.
And do you get calls anymore to like do album covers, or do you think that other form?
Well, you know, I mean, people ask, you know, to have their, they say album cover, but it's a CD. And then some of them do them on vinyl. I've had a couple of them come out that way, but they never say specifically, we're putting out a 12-inch, you know. They just sometimes for promotion, they'll blow it up bigger. It's a shame. It was a great art form, you know. I wish it would come back. You know, yeah.
So back in the day, did you shoot in black and white and color? With
Yeah.
2 different cameras?
Always had 2 cameras.
2 cameras. Okay, that was the question.
Right.
So you loaded one.
Thank you. Yes. Always had 2 cameras, so you could switch and do both, you know. And like I say, I really, really only cared about color for my slideshows. And so, and I was going to say, but I accumulated so much black and white that one day I said, wow, I mean, there's enough here to do a book. And so the end result is this book called Unpainted Faces, which is the Japanese term for natural. Could be translated into unpainted faces. And so we called it that, and then next year we're going to do the color book and call that Painted Faces. So that'll be the companion book to this black and white one.